This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rappin, and with me this week are two pretty alright human beings, I guess. Brian Murray.
Hey.
And Nick White.
Hey.
Thank you both for joining me this week. I'm very excited to be sitting down and talking about comic books, and it's just because it's something that isn't Animal Crossing. And so I gotta ask the question that I ask every single week. How have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Nick.
I've been fine. I've been having to train myself to get up at 7:30 or 8 a.m. on a regular basis, which is it's probably not a chore for some people. It's probably not difficult at all for others, and for me, it's a daily fight. But
Of course.
but I'm getting there. It's it's a lot of work, and beyond that, every day is blurring into the next at this point. I don't even know what month it is.
It's fine.
Is it
fine.
June?
It's May. It's the NSYNC song, or Backstreet Boys, or whoever it was.
It's NSYNC, please. Don't ever make that mistake again. You've embarrassed
Nick
all of
is
us.
a big NSYNC stan.
Yeah.
You've shamed Timberlake's what bleached curls or whatever he had at that one point.
Yeah.
You guys remember that music video where they were all like puppets?
Yes, Nick.
I think
More
that
like
was
Instinct. Can we move on with this?
No, this is an NSYNC podcast now.
Okay, good.
I'm the captain now. So beyond that, it's pretty nice in Michigan right now, which of course is a double-edged sword. Everybody's getting outside and doing yard work. It's just really a concern of how much getting outside are you doing. The local beach nearby me just basically had to close up shop starting today because I guess people don't understand social distancing at the beach. So that's a thing. In terms of what I've been reading, I read a book called Analog, a Cyber Dystopian Noir, Volume 1, Death by Algorithm. This is from Image Comics. It's written by Jerry Duggan, unless that's Gary, but I think it's Jerry.
I think it's Gary Dugan.
Perfect.
I don't know.
We don't. Oh, you said that with such confidence. I was like, all right, good. Well, this is a unique opportunity for me to botch someone's first and last name. So let's just hope it's that. It's drawn by David O'Sullivan, colors by Jordy Belair and Mike Spicer. Not sure why there's two. And letters by Joe Sabino. You want to know how long it took me to get the credits for this book? About 10 minutes, and that's right. Everybody reset your counters for the Nick White Talks About Comic Book DB. I miss it. Please come back. I'm so sad. I don't know what to do without you. Reset it. I had to use Comic Vine, which only had the credits for the writer and artist. And then I had to go through about 3 pages of Google searches until I believe it was a Toronto Public Library actually properly cited the other people. And I know what you're thinking, Nick. Didn't you just look inside the front of the book and figure out who the credits were? Yes, I know I'm one step ahead of you. I already checked it. And they decided to do a full credits page with only last names because apparently they think that's cool. It's not cool. It drives me insane. Don't do that shit ever again.
Nick just wants to properly cite his sources, people. Come on.
Please. And I know you're thinking, Nick, well, maybe check the back cover. Maybe it's at the end of the book. Maybe it's at the end of the issue. It's none of those things. Please, come on. You think this is amateur league? I know what I'm doing.
Oh my gosh, Nick. Are you okay? Has this book shook you completely?
Hey, Nick, did this take up 35 minutes of your life on Friday? Yes, it did. It did. For the record, for those who are really intimately curious and really drawn into this story at this point, I did eventually find them. The first issue had a prolonged cold open, and then they actually did conventional credits.
I see.
So, yeah. Nick, what is this book about? We haven't even talked about that. Great
That's what
point.
I was wondering.
Great point, Nick. You've really... Also, I want to just say briefly before we get to that, Hoopla has this book listed, instead of as a cyber dystopian noir, they have it listed as a cyborg dystopian noir.
Okay.
Tell us how you really feel, Hoopla, about beings with organic and biomechatronic body parts, will you? I don't know if Hoopla was just sort of projecting the book they wanted to read, or if someone was asleep at the wheel, but I thought that was really funny. So yeah, collects issues 1 through 5, came out in October of 2018, second volume slated for July of 2020. Who knows what value that date has at this point. So I think most people are familiar with Dugan at this point. He's written the Chewbacca miniseries. He wrote the Cable series that launched earlier this year. He's written a whole ton of Deadpool, if you're into that. No judging, I guess. And even last year's Punisher Kill Crew. I don't know much about Kill Crew, but I do know that they took the Mortal Kombat aesthetic liberties of swapping out a word that's normally spelled with a C in favor of a K, which is always a winner in my book. I know that it also has Juan Ferreira, who drew it, and I like Juan Ferreira. O'Sullivan is probably not well known to most people. He doesn't really have any other Comixology credits outside of Analog. He's Irish, which will prove relevant in a second. He was working on a book called Crimson Blade for Atomic Diner Comics. He sent pages of that to his buddy Declan Shalvey, who's a fellow Irishman, and he asked if he could pass the pages around, and that's kind of how he met up with Dugan. Everybody knows about Mike Spicer and Jordi Belair, so I don't need to say anything there. So this book takes place in 2024, not that far in the future, and it follows Jack McGinnis, who used to be a quote-unquote company man. He hasn't owned a computer or cell phone in several years, not since the Great Doxing, which took place on Christmas Day 2020. So everybody has something to look forward to in a couple months. He used to work for the NSA, but now he's quote-unquote a paper jockey. That makes him a courier who transports and protects secrets in briefcases. Because nothing is secret on the web at this point. So yeah, it's a little bit of The Private Eye, or actually a lot of The Private Eye. For those who have read Brian K. Vaughan and I think Marcos Martin's book.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of that, and it's also a lot of Mirror's Edge, for those who are familiar with that kind of rooftop courier kind of thing, blended together. The art reminds me a lot of Aaron Campbell and Dan Panosian's artwork, which is a good thing to be compared to. So it's I find it really interesting because obviously it's a book that's sort of a futuristic book, and yet it feels like so frequently when you have these future things, it's like 300 years in the future, flying cars, blah, blah, blah. And this is like, hey, 4 or 5 years from now, this is what's going on. And it's interesting in that way because there are some predictions and projections that don't seem that far off. But I would recommend this to people, even if, yes, the Private Eye comparisons are maybe a little too close for some people's comfort, but I'd still recommend it. If anything else, O'Sullivan has this wonderful ability, and we see this with some other artists, but not all, where their covers just look so distinctively different from their interiors. And that's not to say that either the covers or the interiors are bad. They're both great. But it's a real departure in terms of detail and in terms of medium used. So I found that kind of fascinating.
That kind of reminds me of like Sean Phillips sometimes, where he'll do very painterly covers, and then the interior of the book is like your more standard cover or comic book fare, where it's pencils and inks and like flattened colors, whereas his covers are
like movie posters, like from the
posters.
40s or something. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where you have to double check the credits page to make sure that you properly get the attribution right, unless the cover page is not there, in which case you don't get mad about it and go on a podcast several days later and lose it. That would be unprofessional. Also, briefly, I'll just say I started reading 13 again. I mean, technically it's XIII for those who are trying to split hairs or trying to Google the book. It's written by Jean Van Ham. and drawn by William Vance. It's a Belgian Franco graphic novel series that began in 1984. Ham's best known for his fantasy series Thorgal and Largo Winch. Vance had success drawing Bob Moran and Bruno Brazil before 13 made him famous. Eventually, this turned into, and I don't have this part written down, so I'm just going to have to eyeball this, I think. It was turned into a video game in 2004 with David Duchovny. It was turned into a TV movie in, I think, 2011 with Val Kilmer. It then got turned into a TV series after that. It's massively popular. Came out right around the same time as Robert Ludlum's Bourne series, which is perfectly interesting in the fact that both have a man with amnesia who can't remember anything, but somehow his muscle memory and whatnot would suggest that he is a mean, lean fighting machine, etc., corporate conspiracy, blah, blah, blah. A lot of fun. Really enjoyed this book. Going to try to actually get through all of it this time. We'll see if that happens.
I believe in you.
Yeah,
I believe in you, Nick.
Thank you. If Comixology and I think Cinebook would get together and lower the price of the issues from like what I think is probably like $78 an issue, maybe a little bit less, this would be easier to do. So Cinebook reps, if you're listening, first off, your name sounds like Cinnabon, which is great. Secondly, please lower the prices of your books. Yep, that's me.
We'll get right on that. Brian,
Please.
what about you? How have you been? How have comic books been?
I've been good. Been playing a lot of video games. I upgraded my processor and my computer, so like all the games that I've been buying that I have not been able to play are suddenly within my reach.
Nice.
So that's been a lot of fun. Comic book wise, I finally got around to reading some of the books that Vault of Midnight shipped to me. Thank you, local comic shop, for all you do. I read Transformers vs. the Terminator #1. That was written by David Marriott, John Barber, and Tom Waltz, with art by Alex Milne and colors by David Garcia Cruz. As predicted in a past episode, this is a weird and interesting crossover. Skynet is actually being cast as like the plucky resistance team this time around.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
I told you this was going to be weird.
It takes place in a timeline where the bad guy Transformers, and because I don't think that they called them Decepticons. I think they used a different con word, but
okay.
I'm not a Transformers guy, so I couldn't tell you what any of it means.
Sure.
A Terminator is sent back in time to try and prevent that from happening. He kidnaps / conscripts Sarah Connor while he's back there, because it wouldn't be a Terminator book if the Connor family was not roped in somewhere.
Of course.
I really like the art. It's very like, it's exactly the kind of like very clean comic book art that I look for. My only question is if this Terminator is supposed to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger or not, because he definitely doesn't, but I can't tell if like it's supposed to be that same exact model of Terminator, and it's just the artist just didn't try that hard to make it look like him, which I mean I think is good. Like I think that's totally fine. But I just don't know if it's intentional or not.
That was my problem with the cover too. I was like, I'm not sure if they're just not opting for a real close likeness, or if it's not him, period. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the only indication I have is that I think that somebody mentions him like sounding German at some point or something like that.
Okay.
Which Austrian, but let's not split hairs.
Right.
Well, you did, because I was going to, so totally fine.
I figured I had to get out in front of you on that one.
Yeah.
I also read Deceased Unkillables #2. I finally got my hands on that one.
Nice.
That's written by Tom Taylor with art by Carl Moster. It continues to be a good, fun book. I love this zombie verse, perhaps more than I do the Marvel zombie verse.
Mm-hmm.
If only because it's not as hopeless, if that makes sense. Like in the
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
in the Marvel Zombieverse, it's like from issue 1, everybody is a zombie and everything's fucked. Whereas in this, we still have like human survivors. In this case, it's Vandal Savage has brought together basically all of the immortal DC villains and anti-heroes onto Ball's Pyramid, which is an island famed for tree lobsters, which Solomon Grundy is a big fan of.
Okay.
Is this real?
Yeah. Ball's Pyramid is an actual place. This issue had, and I won't spoil it, but it had a classic zombie movie moment where like there is something very obvious that the characters should do, but they don't, because if they did, then the zombies, wouldn't have a way to ruin their day later.
Right.
I'll just kind of leave it there, but I think that if you're reading this, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I highly recommend, if you haven't read the original Deceased run, definitely important to check that out before reading this. I think that if you just read Unkillables, you could still follow it, but you wouldn't have all the context that makes it an interesting read.
Is this book, is this a follow-up to the original, or is this a supplementary thing that runs alongside it?
It's a follow-up. Because this is, I say it's coming out now. It's coming out whenever it comes out at this point. But it released after the end of the original Deceased.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I do think that it runs kind of concurrently. It starts off with Deathstroke. Like, he gets infected with the corrupted anti-life equation that turns everybody into zombies. And for some reason, he is able to, like, fight it off. I don't know anything about that character, so I could not tell you why. But
Yeah,
it's basically like, he looks at a screen, he gets infected by it, everything goes red, and then he like kind of wakes up a few days later after the events of Deceased. And we follow him from there.
Interesting. Well, for me, I have been just, stuck inside my little apartment craving deep fried chicken. That's all that I really want, is just fried chicken, and I don't know why. But besides that, I have been trying to read some comics here and there. I've been reading One Piece very slowly. I've been trying to get like 5 or 10 chapters in a day. It's a slow going thing, and I have not been hitting that 5 to 10 chapters a day. But when I sit down, I feel pretty good about where I'm at, and I'm in a really interesting point in One Piece, so that's fun. But the big thing that I read was I kind of decided that like once a week I kind of just want to read through a small series. Like I did it with Lock and Key last week and I stayed up way too late to do it. But so this week I actually portioned my time and I sat down and read Trees 1 through 14 and Trees 3 Fates number 1 through 5. For those of you that don't know, this series started back in 2014 and it still hasn't ended. Something between Jason Howard and Warren Ellis. I don't know what the delay is. I'm guessing it's Warren Ellis trying to find a way to add a fitting ending to this story because it's very complex and weird and ephemeral, and I think he wants to give us a solid ending without actually wrapping the story up, and I realize that's a challenge and it can be very disappointing for readers, so I'm sure that's why they're taking their time. But Trees basically is about like the summary from Image is 10 years after they landed all over the world and they did nothing, standing on the surface of Earth like trees, exerting their silent pressure on the world as if there was no one here and nothing underfoot. And if you haven't seen this book, it has some of the most striking covers you'll ever see. They're all done by Jason Howard, and I think this kind of goes along with what Nick is talking about, where you get like a interior artist who does a cover, but the style is so different, you kind of have to question if it's the same artist, and it clearly is. I think Jason Howard's style is very distinct, so it's obvious that it's his style, but it's very simplistic and very like I don't know how to describe it. It's like looks like stencils made out of like spray paint. It's really cool, and the whole series is like that, including the miniseries 3 Fates. But the story is about this world of people, the modern day world, maybe 10 years in the future, where these aliens have landed. So maybe 20 years in the future. So they landed 10 years ago, and we don't know about the day that they landed. We just know about the follow-up and how the world has changed. And these huge stalks of legs that are massive have just like pressed down all over the world. And no one knows why, no one knows what they want. All we know is that every once in a while, some of them will like leak this ooze out of the base of their feet that will just destroy everything around them, like melt everything and everyone like acid. And so entire economies have shifted. These things are so tall that they've changed like the Gulf Stream. They've changed weather patterns and all this other stuff, and they're all over the world. Now, as I recall, like Trees is a swirl of stories with one underlying theme, which is the trees. And Ellis doesn't shy away from the grim realities of this near future world that honestly looks closer to the truth than it did in 2014 when I first read the series. So reading it now was like even more creepy and more eerie. Thinking like if some big global thing happened, how would the world react? And it's kind of like shocking how close that is to today. Obviously, we don't have aliens living among us, but at the same time, seeing the world shaken, it's bizarre to see how people react and how a comic book writer will say, well, everything just kind of goes to shit, and here's why, even though life continues for most people. Ellis, to me, is like a master of pacing in this book, and in the near annoying jumping back and forth between stories, it's super killer unless you're binging this book. Like, I remember reading, like, why I never really finished reading this, even though I bought the subsequent, like, issues 10 through 14, and it was mostly because I couldn't keep everything straight, despite the stories being pretty straightforward. So when you sit down and actually read all of these single issues together in one go, it feels like a very well-crafted novel, especially issues 1 through 14, as you're getting different stories, and some start and some end, and you see how these trees just kind of influence everyone and everything that everyone does. But at the same time, daily life continues. People go to work in their tech jobs. People go work as archaeologists. Like, the world doesn't stop turning because of this massive thing that happened, but people adjust because of it. And you see cities grow and crumble around these trees because they are ultimately infecting the world around them. And I wouldn't say that that's something that's overtly said, but it is something like these trees show up and then everything around them starts to go to shit. And one of the main plot points is, what are these trees trying to do? And you don't really even figure that out by the end of issue 14, which is the end of volume 2 of the series. And so when I jumped into Trees volume, or Three Fates number like 1 through 5, like this one-off story, I was kind of surprised that we got like yet another story in this world, but it was completely unrelated to the main storylines that were developed in Trees, the main series, which makes sense. It's a different story, a different series. But the one thing that we did get out of this book, outside of a pretty interesting murder mystery, was a little bit more information as to what these trees want or what they are. I think Ellis and Howard reveal something really big in this book that is bigger. It's part of the bigger story, and it reveals kind of their philosophical approach to this book. And I was really impressed that the way that Ellis and Howard were able to meld this like philosophical take on the entire story and the entire world that they've built into this story, and it felt so natural. It didn't feel like they were trying to like shove this idea down your throat. Instead, it was like, no, this has made sense to you all along. And as soon as they put it on paper, you're like, oh my gosh, I get what this book is doing. And so I'm really excited to see what the actual ending of this book is going to be. If it's going to be another 6 issues, if it's going to be another 8 issues. We know so little about these trees. We really don't know what the ending could be, because even with this reveal in Trees Three Fates, you still don't know what the actual end goal is of these trees that are these alien spaceships or whatever they are, because we really don't even know what they are, because we're just really getting like the human side of everything, but we don't know what their actual goal is. And I hope that it's revealed even in a vague sense, even if like at the end of the series the trees leave the earth and like the world has to adjust to that change again. That would at least be something that I think is satisfying. I'm really excited to see where they take this. I don't know if any of you have read Orbiter, I mean Brian, Nick, whatever, or the listeners out there, but this book has a very similar feel to that, where Warren Ellis sits down and tries to tell a weird philosophical story about the way that we look at how life is created on Earth is definitely not the same for the rest of the universe, and the needs and wants of people from other worlds, other universes are completely different than ours, and the fact that we think that we're similar to them is almost a joke. I really like that approach. I don't know why. I'm just a sucker for Warren Ellis. If Paul's a Grant Morrison apologist, I'm a Warren Ellis apologist. But Trees is a fantastic book, and I think Jason Howard is at his top game in this series, especially in Three Fates. Going from Trees to Trees Three Fates, there's definitely a time gap, I think, there, and you can see where Jason Howard's art has gotten so much better in its weird, sketchy style that, to me, super duper works for this book. And everything that he's done with Warren Ellis has been amazing. So, I don't know if you guys read this book at all. I think I've tried to convince every single person I know who reads comics to read Trees, but gotta catch up, guys. It's fantastic.
You know, the worst part is that I have not read it, but I do own the first 2 volumes.
Well, you've got everything that's out. I mean, if you didn't read Three Fates, I don't think you'd be missing much. You would be missing something, but I don't think it's going to be that relevant to the main story. I think it's more supplemental.
Yeah, I honestly just own these because I see Jason Howard at conventions, and I'm like, oh yeah, you're awesome. Let me buy something from you.
Yeah.
And this is just what he's had the last couple times I've seen him.
Right. Well, I guess, beyond that, let's just quickly go over, what have you guys been into outside of reading comics? What have you been doing while in your free time, if you have any, during your downtime not reading comics? Let me start with you, Brian.
Yeah, I discovered through Spotify a musical, an off-Broadway musical called We Are the Tigers. It follows a high school cheer squad as they get kind of embroiled in a murder mystery.
Okay.
It's very catchy. If you're a fan of Mean Girls or the Heathers musical, this is definitely in the same vein. It's very spiritually similar to those, but it's got a few real bops on the soundtrack. They did a cool little thing that I enjoyed where they have a character. They gave her own little track for like 30 seconds where she goes, hey, you may have noticed this is a murder mystery and we're about to reveal who done it. So if you want to wait until you see this live to know who done it, stop listening now.
Oh, wow.
That's great. That's great.
Which, living in the Midwest and never actually getting to see musicals does not matter to me. But I imagine that if you live in one of the 3 cities in the world where, musicals happen, then that would be a handy warning. I've also been playing a lot of, and Nick actually let me know this game existed, XCOM Chimera Squadron, or Chimera Squad. If you're familiar with the XCOM games at all, they're kind of a top-down, tactical squad command game. But this time, instead of fighting off an alien invasion, you're working as like a team of humans and aliens and human-alien hybrids, who are working in city that's just called City 31, where the alien hybrid mayor has just been murdered. And so it's your job to investigate like these different factions in the town that you think might have been involved in this murder. And my favorite part about it is that instead of just being a bunch of different humans with different classes, so you used to have like, the sniper and the grenadier and things like that, now you actually have like this alien on my team has psionic powers, and this other one is a big snake lady, and like they all have super unique kits to work with, and so you can really kind of get into changing your squad around, seeing who's good for what situations. And they've added this, they call it the breach system, where every mission you go on is a series of encounters, and between each encounter you have to breach into the next location. Mm-hmm. And depending on like what gear you have and what's available, you can enter from different access points. So like your steak lady, if there are vents in the level, you can send her to the vents and surprise people that way. Or if you picked like explosives for one of your characters, you can send them through a wall instead of going through the doorway. And then based on which one of these things you do, you might get, like characters who go through this location get plus 25 to dodge for the first round. Or, if you went through the vents and surprised people, anybody you hit will be stunned for the next round or something like that. So it's it's a really interesting new layer that they've added on the XCOM game experience.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, highly recommend it.
Yeah. What about you, Nick?
I've just really been loving my Pandora station that I've got set up themed around the band called The Midnight. They're a synthwave band, which of course, as you might suspect, means it's just a whole lot of synthwave music, which for me is sort of that sweet spot of music I can actually get work done to music I can enjoy, but I don't have to feel like I have to focus on that hard in order to get other things done simultaneously. Sometimes there's lyrical elements, but if there are, they're repetitious. So it works really well for me. Hey, Nick, why don't you use Spotify, Grandpa? That's a whole soapbox I'm not going to get into. The other thing, of course, is that people have been telling me, Nick, you need to go outside, get fresh air, interact with people, remember what grass looks like.
Right.
Which, I mean, they're all lies, but you still have to pacify people. And in that regard, I have been interacting with outside or the world we used to know, and that's largely through the boot or lock screen on my Windows 10 PC. For those unaware, when you boot Windows, you get a very beautiful or nice picture to look at of, I don't know, the Taj Mahal or a turtle or a sunset. And then if you click on elements of it, it'll boot up Microsoft Edge, which it hurts me every time, but still, you can boot up a Edge and it'll tell you more about what you're looking at. So that's my portal into the real world at this point. And I'm loving it because that's about as much of it as I need. So
I see. Well, I mean, as someone, who lives in a big fat city, I don't really see grass that often. I'm doing just fine. Give me that concrete jungle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm an inside cat, so.
Well, for me, my only thing I've been doing when I'm, as I said, I've been playing a lot of Animal Crossing, but beyond that, I've been rewatching Trailer Park Boys because it's on Netflix. And, Trailer Park Boys is definitely not everyone's cup of tea. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's the funniest show you've ever seen. It is not. It is very funny to me, and it has a lot of nostalgia for me because I watched it a lot when I was in college.
When we were just going back, Park Boys.
Yeah, when we were Trailer Park Boys, actually living in a trailer. Yeah, I mean, I watched a lot of it when I was in college and stuff, and so just sitting down and watching it all again is nice. Like, it's that nice nostalgia thing that you get for stuff where it just kind of makes you feel comfortable in kind of knowing the bits and knowing all the different things, but forgetting some of the details, and so they're really funny as you come across them again. It's just been really nice to sit down and watch a handful of episodes at a time at night, just before bed. It's like a nice way to basically set my brain up to go to sleep and not, dig through New York Times at 3 a.m. reading about all the things that happened the last day. But yeah, on top of that, as usual, I've just been playing a lot of D&D. We've got one big, fat, large campaign that's going to be ending on the IRCB Discord, which I'm excited about. And then I'm starting a mini campaign with Brian and Kate and Xander to test out this system Quest. I want to make sure that running it as a GM makes sense for me, and these guys have been kind enough to give me their time and let me experiment and figure out what works and what doesn't. So I'm excited about that. But yeah, that's been me. It's weird. I had a handful of different D&D campaigns come to an end in like the last month, and I don't think that has anything to do with like everyone being on lockdown or anything, or that everyone wanted to end things. It was like coincidentally, we've been able to play D&D so much that these games came to natural conclusions, and it was like, oh, well, I'm glad that we got to play so much to actually get to the end of this. So it's been really nice to kind of wrap a bunch of stuff up. Like, we wrapped up a Shadowrun game / Starfinder that we were playing between me and Brian and Kate and Xander, and we wrapped up my big D&D game, and another D&D game I played just ended last night. It's been really cool, but like it's been nice to play games with friends and just kind of hang out for large swaths of time with them. So at least we've got that. So I don't know, come on out to the IRCB Discord, because we've been doing that there too. We've been playing a bunch of games if you're interested. But yeah, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna talk about our quote unquote quarantine house, where we're just trapped in a house with a handful of comic book characters. It's gonna be something. So we'll be back in just a second. Before we start the show this week, I want to let everyone know that we have 2 hangouts coming out in the near future. On May 10th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we are going to be doing just an official IRCB hangout. We're going to get as many IRCB folks as we can. We're going to jump on Discord and just hang out and chat about comics and the world and everything. Maybe not everything, but a lot of things, just to hang out with people and say hello. We just want to be present in your lives, and we want you to be present in ours. So come on to the Discord on May 10th at 3:30 p.m. Also, the day before that, I don't know why I announced them in this order, but on May 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to be doing an IRCB mini book club. We are reading Drops of God Volume 1. This is the Comixology Originals manga that was republished very recently. I think you can buy it for like 99 cents, or you can get it free with your CU subscription. But we're going to be talking about that with some people, and if you show up, if you're a new person, we're going to let you nominate the next book that we're going to read. We've been meeting like every other week to do book clubs. It's been really, really fun just to hang out on the Discord. So that'll be May 9th at 2 p.m. And we've got another hangout, just general hangout with a bunch of IRCB folks on May 10th at 3:30 p.m. all Eastern Standard Time. I live in New York. It's the only time zone that matters. So, yeah, but beyond that, today for the show, we're going to be talking about this thing that someone posted in our topics doc. It's the Your Quarantine House meme. Who are the handful of comic book characters you'd like to be stuck with for a few months, and who would be the worst? So I guess to get things started, we're going to bounce back and forth between the best and the worst, and we're just going to list off one at a time. So let's start with the best, and let's start with you, Nick.
So one of the best for me would probably be Hellboy. I know that he loves pancakes, which is good. It's one of the few things I think I can cook. So
okay, good. I was going to say, are you expecting Hellboy to cook the pancakes? That's the question.
No. You also don't have to worry about reminding people about social distancing when you've got someone like Hellboy around. Even though I think probably one of the weirder things in the book is that people don't usually seem as put off or worried by his presence. So maybe that's something we'll have to work on. Maybe I'll have to ask him to grow out the horns again or something like that, because that was always kind of scary.
It's a bit more intimidating. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the small sort of maybe deal breaker. I mean, I know he likes cats, which is fine, but he's going to have to like keep it down to like 1 or 2 for starters. and then the other is that the cigar smoking is just going to have to stop. Or
it's step outside.
It's going to have to be like a step outside thing, and like, you know, Febreze that fucking duster before you come back in. End of story. But I mean that yeah, it's in terms of like minor issues, I don't consider those to be real bad. So, yeah. I mean,
Hellboy sounds like a good pick as long as he doesn't end up at the animal shelter, you know, cleaning out the stocks like people have been doing for cats, right? Cats and dogs, I guess.
Exactly. That would be, like I said, there's going to be like a hard 2-cat limit, I would say. So
okay. I mean, and we're talking here like this quarantine house that we're talking about. It maybe 2-story, 4 bedrooms, maybe 5 bedrooms if we have to. This is a pretty big house. This is a fantasy world, so we get to, you know, live a little bit. 2 bathrooms.
This is a fantasy world where we can afford real estate.
Look, if you want him to run rampant with cats at your place, that's fine. Okay,
sure.
2 is good. 2 is good.
Okay. Well, Brian, what about you? What's one of your best?
Yeah. I mean, I never thought that Hellboy and my mother would have anything in common, but the cat thing is
Does your mom
there.
smoke cigars?
No, big cat fan.
Okay.
Number 1 on my list is Daisy Wooten from Giant Days. Seems like a real calming influence, which is something that I desperately need in these times. I tend to get a little wound up, and I think that Daisy would be good for, you know, somebody who could just like make a pot of tea. We can sit down and chat, kind of get some of that stuff out.
Right.
I do feel like she and I react to stress in similar ways, so that might not be great. We might, there's a chance that we might just spiral together. But
you also have to hope that she's not dealing with any relationship problems, because we know that doesn't affect her too well.
Yes, I can't remember what her name is, but the tiny German can stay away.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think Daisy would be nice. I think having someone that knows the proper way to make tea with milk and maybe probably, would be up for like a family baking experience of some kind. I think that would be very nice to have in the house.
Yeah, I knew that I had to pick somebody from Giant Days for this. It came down to her or McGraw, but at the end of the day, Daisy was my go-to.
Yeah, you just can't have someone chain smoking in your house. I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, I guess for me, my list is very strange because you would think that I would pick some of just my favorite characters to hang out with, but they are awful. They are just awful people. So one of the first people I picked was Quentin Quire because I love him. Funny enough, he's also on my worst list, but he is on my best list because he's a telepath a telekinetic user. He's hyperactive. He always finds something to do. I think it would get a little grating, but you would know that if you ever needed to feel like you needed to get out and do something, or you needed someone to just, hey man, could you get that coffee for me? Like, he would reluctantly not move in order to get the coffee to you. I think just being nice to him in order to kind of take advantage of his powers would be fun. Plus, he's hyperactive, and so he would really want to always be doing something, whether that's taking down a wall in the house, or building something, or trying to fly around with his power or something like that. I feel like there'd always be something to do, or at least some sort of problem to fix with him around, which to me is a good thing. If I've got something to do to keep my mind off of things, I think Quentin Quire is the best and worst case scenario for me.
Yeah, when he isn't the problem you have to fix.
Yes, yeah. When I don't have to fix him specifically, but I have to fix the fallout of something that he did. At least that's something for me to do.
I think that we all had somebody who was on our best and worst lists. Mm-hmm. For me, that was Tony Stark. Because like if there's anybody who can take a paperclip and a gum wrapper and get you free cable, it's going to be Tony Stark. Right. And on the other hand, there's like literally everything else about him that I think that. If it were me, I would definitely be ready to stick a fork in the toaster by the end of day 3.
Right. I mean, you also have to deal with the problem of, like, he's got a massive amount of money, so he's just abusing all of these various online services to get things shipped to him, like pallets of metal and things in order for him to build new machinery that he is retrofitting your entire house with, which is, like, great, but at the same time, don't do that, Tony.
Yeah,
I get it.
If he's like, upgrading the TV or like building a new computer for the house to use, that's one thing. Mm-hmm. But knowing him, he's got 6 new suit ideas he's been kicking around, and he's viewing quarantine as a chance to finally get around to it. So
right. Nick, what was on your best worst list? I guess if we're gonna jump into that, like someone that's great but also bad.
Yeah, I think that would be like all of the Green Lanterns, or at least all of the Green Lanterns that Earth has been lucky to have as a representative. Because, like, yeah, they can make anything into a hard light construct, which is great. I just need someone to tell me if hard light constructs are edible.
Probably not.
Yeah, what imagines
I don't know.
not.
And I don't know what sort of burden that would put on one's digestive system.
I see.
Probably not going to take the risk. So let's assume that that's a pro. Let's assume that works out, even without the concerns of food, which is always priority number one. You can make a hard light construct of a big new TV or something. So that's great. Let's shift towards the cons here, which would be basically all of the Green Lantern's personalities. They're all like personality deficient killjoys.
Sure.
Which is kind of, I mean, Hal Jordan is not a real fun guy, and Guy Gardner is super aggro all of the time. It's not even like he flips the switch into like go mode. It's just go mode permanently. The switch is broken. That's the only way he functions. And Kyle, what's his face?
Rayner?
Kyle Rayner would probably be crying all the time and wanting to show you his DeviantArt page, which, I mean, maybe for some people that works. For me, I'm not so sure. Jon Stewart would probably be the only like quiet, cool guy in the corner, like, which would be the problem because he would be cooler than me, which I guess just continues this good and bad column of things.
I would feel pressured to impress him all day, every day.
See, I would feel like I put Green Lantern. I specifically put Hal Jordan on my list because in my mind, like, you know, if you're bored, you want to play a game, like, let's just wish upon our green ring and make it happen, yeah? But at the same time, you know, he would also, you know, he's kind of a cop, and I don't, you know, that makes him a jerk, but at the same time, he would at least be out, like, he would at least be policing the, like, stay inside, do the right thing, wash your hands, someone actually, you know, maybe getting on your shit about that. I don't think that's a bad thing. And then he would also probably go 4 or 5 steps beyond that, and that's when it would start to become a bad thing.
Yes.
Somebody who could just make a hard light 6-foot like meter stick and use that at all times.
He just puts a green bubble around everyone that he's, you know, living with so that they can't get within 6 feet of each other.
Yeah, Green Lanterns is a tricky one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and especially when you put the blanket Green Lanterns on. I mean, like, who wants to live with Oa? Like, come on. But anyways, but let's jump into the worst list. Like, who's on your worst list? Let's go with just the first one. I'm gonna bounce back to you, Brian.
You know, this one was a point of contention for me. I went back and forth on her a lot. Finally had to put her on the worst list. Dr. Aphra. Because at the end of the day, she's probably just going to like use me as an incubator to grow the virus so that she can then weaponize it and sell it.
Right. Or try to grow a cure so that she could grow it, but she'd need to use you as an incubator regardless.
Yeah, like I'm not game to get experimented on. Like I do think that she's rad, and I'd love to hang out with her in a situation where I could leave, but ultimately, I think that being trapped with Dr. Aphra would be detrimental to my well-being.
Yeah, I feel like she comes with a lot of like droid baggage too.
Well, who doesn't?
Like
I mean,
you know.
If you've listened to I Read Star Wars comic books, you know all about my droid baggage.
Yeah, okay, that's true. What about you, Nick? Who's on your worst list?
So definitely Ice Cream Man, which will like if you aren't
Nick.
sure why, it just means you haven't read any of the book at all. Like, yeah, there's that faint positive silver lining that like maybe he transports you into a world of your greatest desires, like the musician issue, if you remember that, where he goes and plays with all of the musical heroes and everything and whatnot. Sure. And that's great. Except, like, next thing you know, you're, snap back to reality. Boom, there goes gravity. Boom. Anyway, I think that's enough Eminem for today. But next thing you know, you're back in reality and, like, you've ingested half of your bedside dresser and you can't find your cat and your right foot is missing. And despite all of that, you still got off lightly compared to some of the other people he's interacted with. So... yeah, Ice Cream Man, definitely on the bad side of the list, considering he's, like, flayed people alive, if I recall correctly.
Considering that he's some kind of dark trickster god, yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
So, yeah, he's on the bad list.
Yeah,
and if he's on anyone's good list, like, oh boy.
Yeah, like, he would only be on, like, Freddy Krueger's best list, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Well, so one of my worst, funny enough, I picked Venom, just because I saw that, well, I won't get into that, but I'm thinking Venom is he's just too chaotic. He's so rude, he's so hungry, and he makes fart jokes, and he thinks that they're very funny, and he delivers them in such a dry way. I'm going strictly Venom based on the movie, because I don't read a lot of Spider-Man comics featuring Venom. But even then, like, I feel like just the Venom symbiote would only see, like, the virus as, like, competition, and then would try to make things worse for everyone. So or there would be like a self-preservation thing, and then he would try to, like, the symbiote would try to enrich everyone around him to not die. I don't know. But I feel like Venom would just be bad. It would just be nonstop chaos, especially with other people in the house. Like, if it was maybe just you and Venom, maybe you'd be okay. But I think with a house full of people, no, there's no way things go all right.
That's the big question there, is if it's like Eddie Brock with the Venom symbiote bonded to him, or if it's just the symbiote.
I think it's, that's a good question. I think we're talking Eddie Brock with the Venom symbiote. And I don't know enough about Eddie Brock, but I feel like he's been a jerk in the past. So,
yeah, I mean, especially
I'm going to just go with
Eddie.
that. Yeah, especially movie Eddie. This is Topher Grace
God.
Venom. Somehow I got the Topher Grace Venom living in my house with me, and it's just the worst.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring up Venom being on your worst list, because Anti-Venom was on my best list.
Right.
Wait, who's this?
Yeah, go ahead and explain this to Brian.
Well, with the caveat that I can't explain it, I will do my best anyways.
Okay.
Anti-Venom is, I mean, it's what it sounds like. It's another symbiote, but this one is, I think, like, maybe it was like an offspring of Venom or something. I don't know. Somebody knows a lot about this character, and it's driving them fucking crazy.
Yeah,
Listening
I know.
to me, I have
good.
no idea what I'm
Those
talking
are the
about.
moments I live for. Yeah.
I remember. I think I read the run where Anti-Venom came in, and it was like, I think it was Eddie Brock got another. Like, I think he was touched by Mr. Negative, and it created the opposite of Venom. So, like, instead of destroying life, it was all about saving life or something. But I think your point still stands. Like, the Anti-Venom, like, character or symbiote or whatever it is a great housemate for that reason, because they're doing the exact opposite of Venom.
And one of their powers is canonically, like, curing disease. So maybe I'm cheating a little bit here, but I like the idea that I have somebody in my house who can just kind of, like, magically purify anyone who comes over. Like,
Yeah, that's good. That's
if you want to come hang out, that's fine, but you gotta let the slime do its thing first.
Oh goodness, that is something I never want to hear you ever say to me in person.
Yeah, that was yeah.
See, similarly, I was thinking about adding Elixir to my list. He's an X-Men character, Omega level mutant, who has the ability to essentially cure any disease and, bring people back to life, kind of, but it causes him to turn into this anti-Elixir thing. Regardless, he can cure disease. I was thinking about it, but I felt like it was cheating as well.
Well, I think that anybody who Quentin Quire might see as a threat to his supremacy would not be a good addition to your house.
True. This is true. I mean, in another like best that I have, I had. I guess I had mentioned Hal Jordan already. So, Nick, what was another person on your best list?
Yeah, for me, another best would probably be Livewire from Valiant Comics. With all of her like technopath abilities and whatnot, I don't think you'd ever have to worry about internet connection issues or whether or not your Zoom call was going to drop out or anything like that. Maybe you'd have to like revisit your circuit breakers and whatnot to make sure your house was going to be able to handle what I can only assume would be a torrential onslaught of electricity.
Sure.
But I also have faith that that's something that she'd be able to sort out as well. So
yeah.
Yeah, that's always the big concern is if and when am I going to have internet problems? So
yeah, internet, any kind of technology problem, really. It would be great to just have someone, who's around who can fix that kind of stuff. And Livewire is quite honestly the best because she can speak to machines. And it's awesome.
I will say that this past week, Monday, the power was out at my condo for a while. And then after the power came back on, the internet was out for a while longer. And I was lost, friends. I was adrift in my home for that time.
Right.
So having somebody on hand who can help with that would definitely be good.
Yeah. Losing that last connection to the rest of the world is, oh brother, I don't know what I would do, Brian. You are a stronger person than I to come out of that unscathed.
Well, I slept through a lot of it. Let's get that out of the way right now.
Okay. Well, let's see. Who else do we have on our worst list then? Let's bounce back to you, Brian.
I had Damian Wayne on my worst list, and that's not quarantine related. Just kind of fuck that kid, you know? I think that he would suck to be around under any circumstance.
Sure.
Because, like, I don't know, maybe I'm seeing too much of myself in him, but any like, prickly, surly bastard kicking around the house is going to be trouble. Especially after he's been in there for a week or two.
Right.
Like, I imagine he's not one who handles sitting still well.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see that being a problem, especially, you know, he's a problem to deal with in the Wayne Manor, and that's a huge fucking house, let alone, you know, a 3-4 bedroom house that's doesn't really have anywhere to go and, quote, hide and be broody. Like, I can't imagine what he would be like in that small.
Yeah, like, we don't have a cave for him to fuck off into when he
right.
when he can't handle people anymore.
Right.
Plus, you know, he doesn't do the dishes.
Oh yeah, it's beneath him, Brian.
Yeah. And he'd go on and on about, I'm an assassin. Fuck that kid.
Sorry to all of our Damian Wayne fans out there.
Yeah, I'm at Brian Head on Twitter. Feel free to come after me. I got nothing to do these days.
Nick, what about you? Who else is on your worst list?
Probably, like, Rorschach would definitely be one. Like, day one would be kind of fun. He's got this cool mask. It's like a neat party trick. Part of you is like, that's kind of cool. Part of you is like, I kind of want that for myself. Mm-hmm. But, like, the fun mask stuff by, like, day 2 doesn't even matter because you're just having to weigh all of the other factors that come along with it. Mm-hmm. Just the general cleanliness, his unwillingness to probably take off the trench coat.
Right.
Or just the sheer fact that he continues to wear his hat indoors. Not cool. Definitely not the sort of person who's going to take his shoes off at the door, even though he probably hasn't washed his socks in a while, so I guess he can keep them on. So I'm going to revise my opinion on that almost immediately. Mm-hmm.
Plus, but then you're probably dealing with the fact that, like, every little house mystery becomes like this big injunction where, like, he lines everybody up and, like, he's breaking lights to try to intimidate people, try to figure out who used the last roll of toilet paper. You know, I can't imagine it's fun at all.
Yeah, and I mean, the other problem for me, like, outside of the fact that I think he would almost certainly try to use his grappling gun inside, would be the fact that, like, he would probably just start, like, loudly journaling and, like, monologuing his journal entries, like, in front of you. So he would be like, you know, January 22nd, you know, Nick's cooking is terrible. I can't believe I tried to make it through this. Then he made me watch Property Brothers, which is just sick, corrupt government programming, and be like, we're all right here. Like,
right.
It's not nice. What you're saying is not nice, but you can just keep it in your book, right? And then mail it to a newspaper at the end.
Yeah, it's okay to have these thoughts and feelings, but you don't need to, like, always express every single one of them.
So yeah, I think day 1 would be fine. I think every day after that would just be, like, nihilist violence, probably. So
right.
That would not be good in my book.
Yeah, the last person I had on my worst list was Jughead. Because while it would be whimsical to kind of have a character like Jughead around, and I think him and Quentin Quire and Hal Jordan would it would be a fun little bit, like a sitcom. But what we don't see in sitcoms is the moments between. And that scares the living shit out of me. I mean, Jughead would just... I feel like he would just eat everything and then blame it on no one and just say, well, this is just how it's going to be. Because that's how Jughead talks in my head from, like, the old 50s Jughead strips, or Archie strips. And I feel like it would just be frustrating as hell to get him to do anything. And all he would want to do is eat, and everyone would be mad at him, probably more mad at him than Venom. Somehow. I just feel like it would be tedious, and it would be the worst thing in the world. And I love Jughead as a character, but boy, oh boy, living with him, I think, would just be too much for me.
Yeah, it's tough to think what would be worse, Comics Jughead or Riverdale Jughead.
Oh my god. Oh, I didn't even consider Riverdale Jughead. Oh my gosh, constantly trying to leave the house to go get on his fucking motorcycle and stuff. When you know that's not what you're supposed to do. I would just steal his beanie, though. He would constantly be having to replace that beanie because I'd be stealing it.
And you gotta imagine that thing smells terrible.
Yeah, well, he doesn't shower at all. You know that. Because that's too much.
He seems a greasy boy.
Yeah, very greasy. Good luck. I guess good on you, Cole Sprouse, for making me sick to my stomach. I guess so. Yeah. So last bests, I guess. Brian, Nick, you guys had one more than me, I think. What is? Or I had one more best. So let's start with you, Nick. Who's your last best on your list?
Yeah. Another best from me, also from Valiant, would be Owen from Secret Weapons. Which,
yes.
For those of you who forgot, Owen has the ability to apparate any individual item at any given point in time, with the catch being that he has little to no control over that ability. Although if we want to take a slightly more deep dive and get into the intricacies of the comic, over the course of Secret Weapons, and I think over the course of Harbinger Wars 2, it's intimated that he's getting a slightly better handle on this ability. It's definitely not to a point where it's like any item on demand, right? But I think it's slightly faintly moving in that direction. So yeah, it's kind of a question of, I don't know, maybe if you're quarantining in a house, maybe there's a certain amount of entertainment that comes with what are we gonna get next, and also a certain element of fear that also immediately follows that, of what are we going to get next. So I mean, if anything else, that sounds like the party game that never ends, honestly, if anything else.
Yeah. I would be both excited and terrified by this, but you know what? Probably more excited.
Yeah, every day is an adventure.
Yeah. I mean, and with Livewire and Hellboy, I'm sure it's just going to get, real fun. And Rorschach just trying to solve the mystery of where the fuck these things are coming from. You're building quite the house, Nick.
It's not... As a collective apparatus, it's terrifying. Yes.
Well, Brian, what about you? Who else is on your best list?
That would be Poison Ivy. I wanted to, somebody who might help me make better food decisions. Something that's not, canned soup or frozen pot pies. Been living off a lot of that shit lately. But, having her around, she'd use her plant powers to help us garden, kind of grow our own produce. I'm not sure how down she is on eating plant material exactly.
I was just about to say, yeah.
I imagine if it's like stuff like tomatoes, I'm sure it's fine. We're just eating like the fruiting body that comes off the main plant. And anything where the main plant survives, I think is probably fine. It's when you're digging up and eating the whole thing that I think we might have a point of contention there.
Right. So no potatoes, right?
Yeah.
Or carrots.
Yeah, I mean, the potatoes thing, that's going to be rough on me. But
yeah.
Having some tomatoes, some peppers, if nothing else, I can probably get a salsa going any day of the week.
That's all you really need in life is a good salsa. I like that, because then, I think Poison Ivy would also encourage you to, get out into the sunlight and things like that, which is always supposedly good for your body. I don't know how much I agree, but that's what I've heard.
Coming off a Midwest winter, I definitely am still in the mood where, anytime the sun is out, I just want to go stand in it for a while.
Right.
To be reminded that, oh, yes, that thing that gives life is back, finally.
Let's see. Well, one of the last best person that I had would be Magic from the X-Men. And I know that she's got a bit of a temper, but at the same time, I think we could teleport around things. We could get around this whole walking around near people thing as we teleport into this demon dimension and then back into the reality that we know and love. I think it could be okay. So if we need to just quick pop down to get groceries or go to McDonald's really quick, it's something that we could just do and get back and not have to interact with people. Plus, she's got a huge sword, and I think that's pretty intimidating to most people. So if you just saw someone, materialize out of thin air with a sword, you'd probably just run away, which is great. So, great housemate to have. But at the same time, maybe she should probably be on a best worst list, because I don't think she could put up with anybody's shit on my list at all. Unless she's able to, beat them into shape and actually get someone like Jughead to actually do something. But I think threats of cutting off someone's head or appendages would only go so far after a certain amount of time, unless she followed through on them. So, but I still think Magic would be great to have around, just because she's got a bit of a different perspective on things. And I think if she got sick of everyone's shit, she would just go hang out in limbo for a while and then come back and just, after she's killed 1,000 demons, just to get her rage out. So, yeah.
This is the first time I've ever had the thought of, once somebody makes an example out of Jughead.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, I guess, let's see, we had a couple more worsts on our list. I think, Brian, you had one more worst we didn't get to.
Yeah, that's Wolverine. Because, with, like, the healing factor, he's got a crazy metabolism, right? So he's always eating. He's also
constantly drinking.
Yeah, he's just gonna stink like cigars and cheap whiskey all the time. Mm-hmm. And I just can't do it. I can't handle that.
Yeah, I get you. I mean, we're talking about the smell of Rorschach. I can't imagine the smell of Wolverine.
Yeah, I mean, like, at least he bathes. I think he bathes, so that's a plus he's got on Rorschach. But
true. Well, we've assembled some very disgusting houses, to say the least. I mean, maybe not completely disgusting, but I think we've all got someone who's it's just going to be bad.
We've all got a stinker on the list.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, I guess, this neighborhood's going to be pretty wild, because I imagine in this fantasy world, we all live on the same cul-de-sac. So a lot of neighborhood disputes, probably, as Rorschach is trying to solve why Wolverine is out running in the night.
There's going to be some wild commentary on Nextdoor, for sure.
Yes, yeah, the Nextdoor commentary is going to be great. I can't wait for that, especially with the people that are living in regular homes with families and stuff. It's like, what are these fucking crazy people doing? But yeah, I guess, I'd be curious to know what you listeners out there have for your best and worst housemates if you had to create a fantasy quarantine house. It'd be great to hear what you think and your explanations for why some people are the best and why some people are the worst. We could have gone with a whole bunch of other people, I could say, that would be much better, probably, and probably much, much, much worse. I'm glad that we didn't have, like, a Thanos or a dark side in our worst, because, oh boy, I don't know if we could deal with that, like, existential threat constantly looming over us. I mean, Nick did include Ice Cream Man, so I guess that is there. But
it's pretty bad, yeah.
Yeah, nobody included a Transformer, which I'm kind of bummed that I didn't think about until now. No Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But,
I didn't put them on because I didn't want to have to share pizza, and they would eat all the pizza.
I see. Yeah, I guess that kind of leaves the last question. Was there anybody that you guys were considering that didn't make it to the list?
I had to try really hard to keep Star Wars characters off my list, just because they were like a lot of them, like, they're not really comic book characters originally.
That's a lot of what I was dealing with too. Yeah, yeah, plenty of people where it was like, well, like, comics really aren't their point of origin, so I don't know what to do with so and so.
Could have had a xenomorph in your house,
right? The same thing with, like, there's plenty of Godzilla comics, but it just didn't seem right. So
Me and Mothra, that's the new TV show that I'm excited for.
There you go.
Honestly, that's the best case scenario if you're getting Mothra. Like,
right. Ghidorah and friends, like. I mean, that's a show in itself. It's just King Ghidorah and one human, and it's just a hellscape.
It's Ghidorah, and me.
I guess none of us thought of including any manga characters either, which is only just sort of dawning on me now. So
the last thing I need is Deku from My Hero Academia just crying all the time about his uncertainty. Like, I love the guy, but man, oh man, like, I just don't know if I could deal with it. That would just be too much. And then the Haikyuu kids would just want to play volleyball all the time. And, like, I'm glad that you're trying to be active, but it's not an inside sport, right?
Yeah.
You could probably have Luffy. There you go.
Yeah, oh, yeah. No, but see, then he would just be trying to stretch himself all over the house, and it would be really awkward if you just, like, ran into his torso as you're trying to leave the bathroom, and he thinks it's a great prank, but you're like, that was a bit too close to your crotch for my liking. You know, things like that. But anyways, so if you have thoughts on this, if you have characters that you'd want to see in your quarantine house, we'd love to hear it. Send us a message, send us an email. But otherwise, you can follow us all on Twitter. You can follow Brian at BrianHead. You can follow Nick at Death Star Plans. You can follow me at Mike Rappin in the show at IRCB Podcast, where we post all sorts of stuff on Twitter and Instagram. Don't forget about our hangouts. They're coming up on May 9th and May 10th. Make sure you're there. Come chat with us about Drops of God. Come just hang out with us and have a good time just chatting about whatever.
This show and our many subscriber-only episodes are powered by fans like you on Patreon. You can join now at patreon.com/IRCB podcast.
And if you haven't already, please go ahead and give us a 5-star rating on whatever podcast app you use, whether it be Apple, Spotify, whatever. You know, wherever you are, give us that 5 stars. You can also join us on our Discord at ircbpodcast.com/Discord. And make sure you tell a friend or two about the show.
Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all the music for our show. We love them to death. Xander is a high wizard and a good friend, someone that is just fun to hang out with. He also edits the show. I want to say thank you to Brian and Nick for being on the episode, and thank you to everyone out there who listens to the show, talks to us about the show, jumps on Discord, hangs out with us. It's always great. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.